Well, hey there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome to the SPL Waiting Room. My name's GoreMiser, and I will be leading you through this day. Later on, I'll introduce the karaoke boys we were singing before this went live, and that's the fun stuff that's going on. We also have a whole show packed for you. We're going to be looking at some players and their god pool, whether or not they need to be banned out the way we've been seeing it, or if maybe those are just some wasted bans that are happening in some of these SPL games. We're also going to be talking about a little bit of roster spice that's going to happen a little bit later on. We'll see that later this week in action, but we'll talk about it today. And of course, we're going to be hitting up some of the big matchups that we have, actually most of which happening today and tomorrow. So if you're tuning in, stay tuned because it's going to be incredible SPL play. But the first thing I know that's on everyone's mind, how can we get excited about SMITE when it's just benevolence? That's all there is. That's all that anyone's building. That's all that's happening. The gold is everywhere. Well, the good news is, it's not going to happen anymore. I guess the first and foremost and the front way to say it, it has been nerfed to the point where the GP5 has gone down from, the numbers are 3 to 1, and then the GP5 per level is 0.5 to 0.3. There's math that's going to be in there, but the best thing that you really need to know is that this means overall your number one starter item that was bought last week is no longer going to be the number one starter item. It has nerfed a lot of that gold spooling. You can see 75% popularity there in mid, 42% in solo, 100% for supports. That's probably not going to change too much. 22% in jungle. There were people who were changing the junglers they were playing so they could get some of that, and it was picked up by your hunters as well. So it's going to see at least a little bit of a pullback. We'll find out this weekend how much it's going to get taken away. But the moral of the story is benevolence has been nerfed, and those crazy gold numbers we were seeing at like 20 minutes into the game, not going to exist unless the team is just really, really, really good at farming, and that's going to be very, very difficult to see. And of course, for all these graphics you're looking at to see what happened in Week 5, the builds, all of that, you can go to @BluesUltra on Twitter. Also, I believe on Instagram and on Reddit, wherever you want to find these graphics, you will be able to find them. Of course, Blues also keeps up with a fantastic and brilliant spreadsheet that I like to pull a lot of data from that has a lot of interesting things. Like if you're wondering how many buffs a team has successfully stolen from someone else, that's in there, man. What? A lot of them are hovering around like 120 to 130, but you can never know. I think the Valkyries, yeah, Myth is confused by that. The Valkyries are somewhere at about 70 or so.
I thought you were going to say 7.
No, not 7. 70. You could have guessed it. Myth's over there. 70. Come on, some blue buffs. Like
yeah, we know Myth's there because I'm professional and quiet, and you didn't hear me say a peep during that whole thing.
No, see,
I nearly lost it. I nearly lost it on the Blues graphic. They had Venenu's picture from like his bedroom pic when he was standing next to his cabinet with the trophy.
The one that like Neil.
The one that Neil. Oh, that was so good. That was good stuff.
That was good stuff. But we're going to be talking about, that's Dave, by the way, for those of you.
Yeah, I'm here, guys.
This is Dave Dolson Olson. We are going to be talking about these meta gods that are getting banned, and maybe not necessarily the meta gods, but also some of the non-meta gods getting banned. Namely, and the person that sparked this conversation is up first, genetics. There were a lot of genetics bans over the last couple of weeks, and like it's an interesting conversation because there's some argument to be said, oh, well, he's playing on ping, are you trying to make him uncomfortable, or on a god that's maybe going to be more difficult with it, or, you know, he's really good at these 4 picks, we ban all those, oh, he still somehow ended up on Ymir, which he's really good at, and he hits some sick walls. Dave, I think it was me and you who were casting that one where it was just nice wall after nice wall, like we needed a counter. Is it worth investing so much to stop genetics when obviously it's not stopping him?
If we're going off the 3 picks at the bottom of the screen here, yes for Terra and Ymir, in my mind. Kepri, you know, maybe if you're kind of later in the ban phase, he still needs a pick. Kepri's still there.
Though.
Right, that's true. That's true. We saw that Kepri didn't have to ult. So that's a real specific thing to look at. I think Kepri a little bit lower on the ban priority list. We've already seen teams kind of answer this question, though, and it feels like genetics is constantly getting a few bans thrown his way. I love banning out the Terra. I love banning out the Ymir because this guy's proven, regardless of his ping or play location status, that the walls and the synergy on the Ymir, and then as well as the ultimates and things like that on Terra, are all going to be really good. And when a guy's playing the way that he is, you have to invest bans in the direction where the team you're playing against is starting to find their wins. And in the last couple of sets, a lot of that has been genetics, and a lot of that has been Ymir. in Terra. So yes, I think we should not be surprised, Gore, if we start to see Terra and Ymir specifically just on cooldown.
But compound them. Get rid of the Fafnir too. Get rid of the.
Yeah, right. Then you got to worry about
name
Fafnir.
The top 3. Look, be still my beating heart. I love watching those wall highlights. That I could watch. I could literally watch this all day. Like that's a serotonin just release button in my brain. And so yes to the Ymir, yes to the Terra. But I think the question, and if I kind of want to hear yours, like when we jump into some of those more, I don't even know niche picks. Like obviously Khepri is probably way more niche.
A little bit more.
But like your Fafnirs, your Yamojas, like there's so many front lines available. Do you just ban all 5 when you're up against someone like this?
I think for genetics in particular, you can go ahead and get rid of his more eclectic picks, the picks that you more synergize with him, the Terras and the Ymirs that you've already highlighted, because everyone's playing Yamoja at an incredibly high level. Everyone's playing the Fafnir at an incredibly high level, so if you leave those available, both of them, you at least know you get one. Whereas if you leave Terra up and Fafnir's available as well, I'm pretty sure Genetics is going towards Terra. I'm pretty sure he's going towards the Emirs because he elevates his team so much when he's on those picks.
Well, it's one of those things I'd kind of highlighted earlier where the conversation is, well, Genetics is having to play for me. Maybe that's something like, oh, we'll force him onto Ymir, and like there's no way he's going to be able to hit these walls consistently.
He do.
You saw those highlights. Obviously, that's not going to be enough. So if that is any mentality that anyone's approaching it, it's not working very well.
Mentality.
And so it's definitely not something that they need to control. So maybe it's just Genetics. Well, not maybe. It's just Genetics, as it turns out, who's really, really good at a lot of these supports. But he's not the only player who lately has been doing really well and has also been playing simultaneously the meta and also their own stuff. Paul is someone that comes to my mind because we've been seeing hell bans. I think we've seen a Hebo so far this phase. He's willing to pull out the weird ones. The ones that only Paul so far has been able to play and play successfully. But he's also playing your Raijans, your Giannis's, and your Baba Yagas. Myflin, should he just embrace the jankiness of his own style, or should he keep going for the meta picks?
I think he should play whatever's working for his team, and obviously the Hell's been working out incredibly well. But whether or not you want to ban out this Hell, if you're forced to look at the Hebo, I don't think you should against Paul. I don't think that it's necessarily something you have to do. Sure, if you think he's going to play Hell in a specific match, ban that, but don't go much further than that because Hell legitimately adjusts how you have to address the game, adjusts how you approach these neutral objectives. But when he's playing Hebo, okay, it's just a burst mage on the other side, a standard one. I think I'd prefer to play against Hebo than something like the meta picks inside of the Morrigan or Raijin or Morgan Le Fay. I see how I put the Raijin in the middle, so I don't have to say Morgan twice.
Morgan.
But TLDR,
attorneys at law,
don't ban the other weird stuff, but maybe do ban the Hell because he's just so good at that pick.
All the other stuff, that's fine. It's Paul, whatever. Hell, get rid of it.
He's got such a big god pool.
But, okay, so here's a better question for you. Yeah, that's the thing I'm kind of learning, right? I listed Genetics gods, and I'm like, man, I listed 5 for bans, and there's still another 3 gods I can think of. Same thing I think goes for Paul. But I guess, Dave, I'll ask you this one. Is Hell, if bannable, as Myth says, a top 3 or a bottom 2 ban? Probably second phase?
Yeah, I think second ban phase for Hell. Because at that point...
Because you have to let Terra and Ymir and Yamoja.
But at that point, I think enough of the draft has gone by. I feel like you're niche picking a Hell anyway towards the end of a draft. Like, throwing a Hell out there, like, first pick, you can try to counter around that if you're the enemy team.
That's very brave.
I would assume if Paul needs a pick, and it looks like a decent Hell draft, I think the last 2 bans is probably where you address that.
Well, so it's interesting to look at mid. I honestly was trying to think of another player who's just got... Well, actually, Lasper probably would have been another good choice for this because there's a lot of target bans that tend to get thrown his way. But another support player who is, I think, just kind of grown into the role. Look, we had, 2 rookies join in Season 7, and one of them has exploded with success here in Jake. And it is that, he's playing... When he plays Yamoja, does really well. Ymir does really well. The Fafnir, maybe not so much. In fact, actually, I think Fafnir was his worst performing god of all the meta gods. But he's got so many others. Myflin, he's even willing to pull out. He hasn't done it in a while.
Are those the win rates?
Tier supports. That's a good question as to whether or not those are the win rates. I wouldn't be surprised. They've been winning a whole ton.
That's ridiculous, right?
Those are the win rates as we're hearing it. So 100, 100, 42. We'll ignore the last one, the 43% there on the Fafnir. But Myth, again, kind of back to it's the same concept for the last two. Do you need to ban these gods against Jake if you know he's just going to perform as well, save for Fafnir, on the others?
Well, this is a more nuanced conversation when you're talking about a team that is so close to the top of the league. Are they winning because of Jake? Sure. At points, Jake is making plays that absolutely change games. I mean, I'm not going to take that away from him, but the entire team is doing so well, it's very difficult to isolate this one player and say, all right, we have to deal with awesome Jake 408s, Ymir, or Yamoja. I think, if anything, you address what you want from your own draft. So if I'm the Camelot Kings playing against the Bolts and I think to myself, I need duo lane pressure, that's where I want to originate all of my aggression, probably ban the Yamoja because she's one of the best supports at pushing inside the game. And then you can let him have something like his incredibly strong Ymir because you know it's a mobile and that's where you're looking to find your pressure anyway. So I think that this is a much more difficult question to answer when talking about Jake in particular, just because of how well his entire team has been doing.
It is not an easy feat. He's also played Geb and Horus at some point in this phase, which I completely forgot both of those games. But it is, I guess, Dave, here in the question, we just saw that it's a 43% win rate on the Fafnir. He's been one of the meta picks. Obviously, I think the Bolts maybe trying to stray away from this pick starting now.
Right.
But it seems like of all the other picks that are available or all the other supports that are meta and bannable right now, maybe you kind of want Jake on the Fafnir.
Yeah, I don't know if I want Jake on anything in particular. I want Jake on the sidelines if I'm playing against him. Yeah, I mean, I think Yamoja probably takes a ban anyway, just because of how good Yamoja is at the moment. I think Myth really nails it here, though, because how do you ban against a team where any given game, it could be Laz, it could be Ven. Feels like Haddix can have these great pop-off games. Barracuda has been playing so... I don't know how you ban against this team. So, yeah, I think you probably throw a Yamoja ban out there. Ymir has been banned out against teams that are not the Bolts in the top 3 bans. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Ymir, Yamoja, some other third ban, and then, maybe Jake has to go to something like the Fafnir and a little bit lower of a win rate, but we'll see. Yeah, I think the win rates there kind of indicate what teams will prioritize against the Bolts.
I don't know if you know how percents work, but 57% is a pretty big drop in win rate. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, wait. How do percentages work?
100, 143.
No, I know, right.
What are fractions?
Did I say something just now that made it unclear whether I know how percentages work?
No, you just said a little lower for like 1%. It's like,
I gotta give him a little
lower. Yeah,
it's a little bit lower.
I just wanted to give you help.
Half.
Yeah, it's just
More than half.
Look, it's just a bit lower.
It's just a little
Just a teensy bit. Look, if you take
It's
the
just
number,
a little bit lower. Come on.
well, there you go. So I guess overall, if you want to, if you're playing the Bolts, let Jake have Fafnir. At least that's what I've learned looking at the numbers. But at the same time, just don't play the Bolt. That's not possible. You have to play the Bolts. That'd be a good
like
option.
Twice a
right?
phase. It's okay. Just only twice.
Only twice a phase. They've only beat 8 teams in a row now. So okay, it's looking good. We'll be talking about them a little bit more. But now we're going to pivot to Week 6. This is actually a really good time to start talking about it because we're, about 10-ish minutes out, give or take. And so Week 6, there's some awesome sets. Scarabs going up against the Titans. Bolts going up against the Kings. Dragons later today taking on the Leviathans. Some really big ones we're going to be talking about. But first and foremost, we've had some roster changes. Well, just a roster change. Just one.
Ooh.
Scary D is no longer in the jungle. Layers, who was booted off the Scarabs, is going to be joining the Titans for the weekend. And,
To be clear, no longer in the jungle or on the team. Right?
That would be true.
The SPL.
No longer in the Titans or the SPL currently. Solo laner made jungler, didn't seem to work out for him. Layers, jungler made not jungler, made jungler again. I guess, Dave, thoughts?
I think I'm excited to see how this maybe revitalizes the Titans a little bit. This is a Titans team that they felt a little stagnant, didn't they? Where it sort of they'd beat the lower teams, they'd have struggles against the upper teams. Layers is the type of player who would have some pop-off games even against some of those upper teams. Scary D had good games. I think it adds a bit of a lightning bolt to this Titans squad, and you know what? Admittedly, I don't know. I'm not too big to admit that I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. I think it could work because Layers has had good games. Whether it's going to be good on a consistent basis, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, after Dave high-roaded me here and admits that he doesn't know, I'm going to try my best to know a little bit.
You say you don't know.
I think that what Layers brings to this Titans draft is a little bit more versatility inside of the jungle. And when I say that, I mean that when does Scary D look good as a jungler? When he gets Loki, when he gets Robin. I think that's it. I think that's the entirety of his SPL tier jungle pool, and that's not a slate against the player. Obviously, he's incredibly talented, has multiple world championship rings, but that's inside of the soul lane, and that is a very distinct tonal shift between solo and jungle. One lane, you're left alone in an island, you farm up to level 20, and you're just a tank. You get to run down that warrior tree, and the other one, you have to work for your farm. You have to go all the way across the map. You get yelled at by your ranked teammates, and it's a very hard transition to make. And I think that the Titans were likely just not happy with the speed with which Scary D was improving, so instead they needed something to get them a little bit better, a little bit more quickly, and, well, Layers has got a lot of tenure inside of the jungle. He's played at the SCC level, he's played in the SCL, he's been in the SPL, he's done it all, and he's got a much deeper god pool than Scary D does right now. Does that mean that Scary D doesn't have potential to be better than Layers at some point in the jungle? That's yet to be seen, but as of right now, this should be an improvement.
Makes things
See, he knows stuff.
a lot more
You had
interesting.
to pretend like you knew stuff. That was so good. That was spot on, Myth. Thumbs up.
The Titans are going to be playing the Scarabs. So Layers will get a chance at maybe some revenge a little bit later on this week, making things interesting. But it's interesting because Layers was last year, in my eyes, he was the player alongside Johnny, which that's an entirely different conversation to crack open. But they were the most talked about junglers in the SEC, and so getting to see him back, we'll see if he gets to live up to it for a second time this time, because the first one was whelming, not necessarily over or under. It just whelmed people. So we'll see what he's going to be able to do now on the Titans as we take a peek at the schedule, because, again, things are going to be pretty spicy. Tomorrow, the Titans and the Scarabs will go up against each other, which I think is going to now be a very, very, very fun match to take a peek at. Scream versus Layers. Ooh, it's just writing itself here live in front of you. We also have the Bolts 2 sets this week, and they're trying to tie the longest win streak in SMITE. If they get both of these on Friday and then on Sunday, one versus the Kings, one versus the Titans, then they tie with NRG for the longest win streak in SPL history. And then, if we look a little forward, they have to beat the Scarabs next week, and then they get it. So we'll see if they're going to be capable of doing that. They have to make it through this week first. That's the hard part. They're looking only at the Kings right now.
That is the hard part. I agree.
Oh, yeah? That is going to be where their eyes are. The Kings hovering right behind them at 6-2, and they'd love to make that a 7-2 and an 8-1 and close that gap a little bit more. But later today, we're going to be watching a different set, another couple of top teams, the Dragons taking on the Leviathans. Dave, you have a noise for this one. It sounds like it's going to be an interesting one for you.
I don't even remember who I predicted for this one, because this is such a close matchup in my eyes. Because if you had asked me, a couple weeks into the phase who was going to win, you'd probably say Leviathans hands down, because the Dragons had a slow start. They looked a little bit out of sorts. Who knows which Dragons team is going to show up on any given day? Over their last couple sets, that's changed. It feels like this Dragons team is back to their old selves. They're back to the world beaters, and who knows who's going to be able to take them down. Well, the Leviathans are a team that has also looked the same. We wondered if there would be a little lag between Zapman joining this team and when they'd get to top whatever status, top 2, top 3, top 4 status. Well, they're already there.
Yep.
And this is a team that, despite being tied for third in the standings, looks like they could give the Bolts, looks like they could give the Kings and the Dragons a run for their money. Look, we're going to see who I predicted in a minute. In a way, I think this one's a bit of a coin flip.
It's definitely one that's more fun, I think. And also,
a lot of fun.
I mean, we're getting to the last 3 weeks of play for Phase 2. Like, this is starting to have implications as to where you're going to be standing in playoffs, right? Like, both of these teams are at that perspective where you're fighting for third, and that's the difference between having to go up against a very difficultly seeded team or a not-so-difficult seeded team. And so it'll be fun to watch how this one shakes out, just because of the fact that they have to start looking forward. Of course, if they just absolutely tear and go on a loss streak, then that could change everything for them. But I think it all starts here today. Speaking of not just playoffs, but I also think just in general, a win streak and an undefeated team, Myflin Kings versus Bolts tomorrow, that's just going to be great.
Gore, at the beginning of the year, I had said that the Kings were my personal favorite as a dark horse to win Worlds. And I think that they're still on that trajectory. When they are playing at their absolute best, the Kings look nigh unstoppable. They can do it. But the Olympus Bolts,
They are actually unstoppable.
I had no clue coming into this year that they were going to be as strong as they have been. It is ridiculous what they've been able to accomplish. And I don't think I'm surprising anybody when I say that the Olympus Bolts pretty heavily favored inside of this matchup right now. Can the Kings win? Absolutely. And if you were to ask me when you were bringing up that energy run, taking up the longest win streak in the SPL, I think the Kings are the only hope for the Bolts haters out there to end that streak where it stands.
It's going to be... That's a task, man. That's so difficult. Hey, remember the team that beat you, by the way? Well, I guess for Barra specifically. Nobody else was on that team. It's just Barra. But the team that beat him twice in a row in Worlds back-to-back, the team that's a two-time back-to-back world champion, the first ones to do it, the only 10 players until recently that held that crown. Hey, you're trying to not just tie, but then break their record. Tie this week, again, Kings is the first ones they have to go forward with, and then I think it's Titans later, so we'll get a nice little peek at them tomorrow as well. The Titans now playing with Layers, taking on the Scarabs. And Dave, this one's important. More so, I think, maybe for the Titans now because they just got a new jungler, but also for the Scarabs because they're 1-7. They really need some wins if they want to make it to those playoffs.
Yeah, this is not only an interesting game because of storylines. Of course, it's the very public falling out that Layers and the Scarabs had.
Obscenely public.
Right? I mean,
much.
and some of that still continuing, and so there's, of course, a storyline there. Layers gets a chance to beat that team. Scream is now on the Scarabs, so that becomes very interesting. The guy who replaced you on your previous roster will have some extra weight in that matchup as well as the way that these teams have been playing. I don't know if the Scarabs have been playing like a 1-7 team. They are 1-7, so they quite literally have been. But the gameplay has looked better already, it feels like. This was the Scarabs team, and I forgot who it was on the roster that put out this tweet, but it felt like they kind of lost at every facet of the game previously in a lot of their matchups. They were in these sets, weren't they? You know, they had a tough task against some of their opponents. They played the Leviathans, played the Dragons. Anyone would have expected them to just kind of roll over, but the Scarabs didn't. And I think that Scream brought a bit of a breath of fresh air to this squad. So outside of just the storylines of Layers and the jungle and all of that, I think this is a really big heat check for the Solar Scarabs. This is a beatable Titans team who has been kind of reeling, and you know, now they have a new guy in the jungle for the first time. I think there's going to be a lot of takeaways from this matchup as far as what we can expect from Titans moving forward, but the Scarabs as well.
And if just your quick thoughts, because like we had mentioned Scream, but the Scarabs are also having to kind of incorporate Stewart into this matchup as well. Carry has been, I want to say it was a little easier last week because you had so much gold just flowing into your pockets just in general. But is he someone that is going to help elevate this team the way Scream has, or is he just kind of a filter until maybe we either he gets better or someone better comes along?
Go back to the tail end of Season 7, and I can be quoted as saying, I think Stewart is the next player to step up into the SPL. He has been incredibly impressive at that SEC level, and we haven't seen him do that at the SPL level just yet. I think it could be attributed to his nerves. Maybe it's his rookie season. He's coming in the middle of a phase.
And all of that, to get dropped in.
You join the lowest seeded team as well, so all these factors can contribute to making him look maybe not as good as he could on the play on field. But that said, he has looked fine. He hasn't been a hindrance for this team. He hasn't been an asset. He hasn't been, a game changer for them just yet, but given a couple more weeks, and this has been a narrative that has been revolving around the Scarabs since the conception of the Scarabs, the most improved team, if you would, I think that Stewart has the chops to live up to that moniker. I think he will continue to improve at an incredibly rapid rate and eventually will be an asset to this team. But as of right now, he's just a role player. He's just there to sit in the lane, try not to lose, and then deal damage to objectives when they get there, be an ADC in the late game. But when you're talking about the transition from Zapman to Stewart, you're losing veteranship, You're losing a shot caller, you're losing that PK mentality of just sticking into every single game. I think that it is going to be a significant downgrade in the short term.
Well, it's definitely a change overall for the Scarabs, but like David mentioned and you had touched on, they've looked pretty decent compared to what we were seeing prior to that. So definitely a lot more engaged. We'll have to see, at least if you two put your money where your mouth is. I know where I bet this week.
I don't remember where I bet on any of these.
And I will say, I'm pretty sure. Did I vote before or after we learned about the jungle change?
I voted before.
Oh no, I voted before. That doesn't matter actually to me. I still believe in all my.
A lot of this is going to be news to me. How did I vote this week?
Dave, no clue how he voted this week. I'm surprised.
Oh, I'm with Aggro.
Dave
we're good.
And Taco going with the Dragons over the Leviathans here, the only two there. But we're almost 50-50. Chat swings it over in favor of the Titans for the Scarabs and the Titans there. Everything else at the end of the week is all matched up. So Dave, I guess your Dragons Leviathans, you had said that was a hard one to choose.
Yeah, it was very difficult to choose. All I can think of is when I voted on this one, it was like 51-49 Dragons. I truly think it too shows up today, and that's such a non-statement because it's that way any given day. But between these two teams, it really truly is who's just playing the better Smite today. It's not a lopsided matchup. It's not a top seed versus a bottom seed. This is not one that either of these two teams should run away with. If we see the Dragons play the way that they have played in the past, and they really truly have gotten their feet back under them, that's why I vote Dragons. But if the rock solid consistency of the Leviathans is what shines through today, and the Dragons are a little stumbly, then I think the Leviathans take it. But I think the 51% lean towards the Dragons on my vote.
You still got Titans for tomorrow? I'm just curious. This is genuine curiosity. Scarabs Titans, it feels almost like it's a toss-up now.
No, I don't think so. 70-30 Titans.
The
man.
laugh. Okay.
I'm not concerned about the Titans. The Scarabs
Did you watch
have
their
to
games
prove
last
themselves. Well, yeah, okay. Well, I'm not concerned about the Titans up against the Scarabs. Let me emphasize it that way.
That's a nice way to statement it very quick, right? Yeah, yep. I'm not concerned. I'm a little concerned about the Titans, but not against this team specifically. Yes. I'm excited to watch that one tomorrow. It's going to be a fun one to watch, but that's not what's going on. Today, we've got the SBL coming up. You can see your matches down there. Later on, I believe we're going to be seeing the Dragons take on the Leviathan, so that is going to be a fun one to watch. So make sure you stay tuned. You have a little bit of time right now before things get kicked off to take a quick break, do whatever you need to do. But we'll be right back with Week 6 of the SBL.